Boeing is the world's largest aerospace US company and leading manufacturer of commercial jetliners and defense, space and security system. And Boeing in India is the last 75 years. Indian Air Force has many platforms, many advanced platforms from Boeing, and in the verge of acquiring more such platforms in India. But today we will focus on largely Boeing Defence in India. And of course, beginning with that, we'll talk about Boeing MAX 373, some of the updates from Boeing President. So let me announce, we have today with us Boeing President, Mr. Salil Gupte. He is a Stanford graduate. He has specialized in business administration. He is a Boeing man for a long time. Has worked in various divisions in Boeing. So welcome, Mr. Salil Gupte on BW Business World. This is Manish Kumar Jha. And we'll begin with asking about, first of all, of course, we'll focus on, my first question will focus on the commercial aspect of the Boeing, the commercial aviation. We'll start with 737 MAX because our readers and viewers would like to know about the latest updates since the crash happened the last year. What is the update on the recertification of the Boeing? And I also understand COVID has impacted air travel and also OEMs like you. COVID has impacted the production cycle and production line as well. Give me the overall picture of Boeing, how have you come up and what is the update so far on this? Yes, please.
Well, thank you, Manish. Hopefully I'm audible, and it's a pleasure to join you for this discussion today. For us at Boeing, certainly the past couple of years have been very challenging, and this year has been a year unlike any other in terms of the challenges that the COVID-19 crisis has placed on all of our customers, all of our stakeholders, all of our partners, and of course our employees, teams at Boeing, not just here in India, but all around the world. But through that all, we have taken some significant steps to ensure that Boeing emerges from this crisis strong and that it, of course, delivers the 737 MAX to all of our customers as safely as possible and exceeds all of those expectations that our airline customers and the passengers that fly that airplane are going to have, because they will need to feel safe when they get on that airplane. And so I'll share with you a little bit of what's been going on over the past year. We have been working very closely with regulators around the world. And that is an important point because it's not just the US Federal Aviation Administration. It goes beyond that. We have been working with a global set of regulators that include EASA, the European regulator, and yes, the DGCA here in India, and taking their feedback on the airplane. A question that I get so often is, well, why is this taking so long? Because, of course, Boeing talked about some of the technical solutions to a few of the issues that were found in the investigation around the two crashes. And Boeing has talked about those solutions since last year, 2019. And so the question is, well, what is the reason for the timetable? Is it COVID? What is it? And what I'll tell you is that every element of feedback that we get from every major regulator around the world has to be closely assessed, has to be discussed together amongst all the regulators, and then has to be incorporated onto the airplane. And then all of those incorporations have to again then be approved by all of those regulators. That is the extremely cautious and deliberate method of getting this airplane back in the sky safely. And of course, as you mentioned, COVID has slowed some of that down this year just because of the ability of regulators and others to travel around. But the regulators have worked together extremely admirably despite that COVID situation, and have in many cases worked virtually. In many cases, we've flown the airplane to various sites to allow for testing to occur. And we're therefore very grateful for the regulators' flexibility in accommodating that during these COVID times. And so therefore we continue to work towards getting that airplane back in the air, hopefully in the near future. And the timing of it is going to ultimately depend on what the regulators decide. But you saw in the news just a few days ago, the head of the FAA, Mr. Dixon, flew that airplane himself and indicated that that was an important part of the process as it enters its final stages. So that's where we are in the 737 MAX, and I hope that provides some clarity as to why, what the steps have been and how this is going. And again, I'll just reiterate that the DGCA has been a very important part of this process, not just recently, but throughout the entire process. And we continue to engage with them and answer all of the questions that they have as well.
Salil, thanks for the very elaborate background, on this. But as I understand, crisis did impact some of your order book, worldwide, and so in India. I'm also aware of some of the good news, some of the orders received from the Poland as well. Having said that, could you talk about specific to India?
Sure.
How did you retain your orders, which were some of them cancelled or were halted due to the pandemic? And also due to the crisis which happened a year back, please.
Yeah. So the biggest impact on orders, of course, for Boeing, and those orders still contractually remain on the books. But of course, as you can imagine, there's an impact from the ceasing of operations last year of Jet Airways, which at that time was our largest customer in India and was the largest customer for the MAX in India. So the jet crisis, of course, predates COVID. It actually even, it has very little to do with the MAX itself. But that was a big blow for our order book in India. And that would have happened whether there was COVID or not. Beyond that, you have seen some reduction in orders around the industry as COVID has impacted the near to medium term demand for new aircraft around the world. Now, just in the last 48 hours, we have released our current market outlook, which is the long-term forecast. So this is the 20-year forecast for Boeing and Airbus and all of the other OEMs. It's an estimate of what kind of aircraft demand there will be around the world until 2040. And that forecast indicates that there will still be over 2,000 aircraft required in India over the next 20 years. And just to put that in context, that's a change of about 11% or so, maybe a little bit more, but globally it's about 11% is what we're thinking, and from last year. And so my point there is that yes, while there have been some cancellations around the world and we've reduced our production rates in the near term to align with that new near to medium term demand, the long term state of the industry and the long term demand for aircraft is only slightly changed.
Great. So again, for my viewers and ladies and gentlemen, we have Boeing President Salil Gupte. And we are largely going to talk about focus on defense aspect of Boeing in India. But before I start asking you a question on key defense and security collaboration in India, I would like to give my viewers a perspective. Boeing, based in a US company, exports, provides India a lot of advanced platform. India-US defense bilateral relation has come of the age for the decade. We have about some $19 billion of defense trade between these two countries, and Boeing has played very key role in providing some of the key advanced platforms to Indian Air Force. I'll just give viewers a bit of a basic understanding about what Boeing has given India for the last decades, being one of the key partners in Indian defense and largely Indian-US defense bilateral relation. So Boeing has some of the top of the line most advanced platform, starting from 11 C-17 Globemaster, 8 P-8I maritime surveillance aircraft, 4 more on order, which is in the pipeline, 22 AH-64 Apache attack helicopter, which is the best in the class attack helicopter in the world, is heavily used by the Indian Air Force, which is also being tested at some of the highest altitude platform places in India, including Ladakh, and we have 15 CH-47 strategic Chinook helicopter. So we have some of the large advanced platform from Boeing, and which is people largely know Boeing as a commercial aviation in India. So this is the Boeing portfolio in defense. Having said that, could you give us a broad spectrum of Boeing Defence in India? What are the platform you are offering now to Indian Air Force, and some of the basic understanding for our viewers, please. So start begin with to Salil Gupte.
Yep. So yes, thank you, Manish, for that. I mean, I'll start by saying, first of all, a happy Air Force Day to all of your viewers. And on this 88th Air Force Day, I will tell you that whether it's at the air show that's always held and the demonstrations that's held around events like Air Force Day, or that are held around events like Republic Day earlier this year, I will tell you there's an incredible sense of pride as an Indian, as a Boeing leader, to hold my young child up on my shoulders and look at the skies as a Chinook or an Apache or a C-17 or a Navy P-8I flies overhead, and know that it's our team here in India that played a role in ensuring that those aircraft were made available to the Air Force, to the Navy, and soon to the Army as well. As you mentioned, some of those platforms that we are also continuing to discuss with the various services about potential follow-ons to those. I can't go into too much detail about those conversations, but of course it has been reported in the press that there's of course interest in additional P-8Is that we're engaged on, and there has already been a follow-on order for 6 Apaches for the Army that has been placed earlier this year, in addition to the 22 Apaches that the Air Force has already taken. And we're very excited about those Apaches as well, because those 6 will be a large part of Make in India. The actual body, the fuselage of those 6 Apaches are going to be made in Hyderabad at our Tata Boeing Aerospace Limited joint venture that we have there, that makes these Apache fuselages the main part of the helicopter, not just for India, but also for major foreign customers like the U.S. Army as well. So that's an incredible point of pride for us. It's a demonstration, I think, of what Boeing in India is, because Boeing in India is not just those platforms. We're not a company that just sells these products to India. We're also a company that works very closely with the Indian services to sustain the products in India, to maintain the products in India. We have a company that was set up several years ago, Boeing Defence India, that focuses on that sustainment. And the job that they do is incredible. The C-17, I'll just give you an example, working with our partners in the US and around the world, the C-17 is part of a global sustainment program. In other words, it's a global network of maintenance that Boeing provides to the whole C-17 fleet. That's all international customers of the C-17, plus the US Air Force. I can tell you, I'm proud to tell you, that the maintenance and sustainment performance in terms of reliability, availability of the aircraft for India is the highest. It's second to none. And that's the capability of the team that we have here in India. And the P-8 is another example. It's not just the greatness of that platform and the viability of that platform, but the sustainment work that we do in India for India has allowed that aircraft to have such incredible reliability that they have flown it in the last 5 years as much as they flew the predecessor to the P-8, a different aircraft, in the 25 years prior to that. Absolutely mind-boggling how much they fly this aircraft and how creatively the Indian Navy uses that aircraft in various missions beyond just maritime patrol. So that's another part of that Boeing in India story. It's not just the great platforms, it's all that we do in India to ensure those platforms are available for the Indian services. So that's the second thing. And then I would say the third thing is the Make in India portion. The Make in India portion, Boeing has grown to 3,000, about between 3,000 3,500 now, actually, people in India over the past few years from just, a few dozen some years back. We have grown our sourcing for many of these defense products, but also our commercial products by 4x just in the last 5 years to $1 billion US. So all of that Make in India growth is also part of that Boeing in India story.
So, Salil, you spoke about for Kachi being part of Make in India initiative. One of the major components, the fuselage, would be made in India pretty soon, and $1 billion of valuation. But defense is a long term. We talk about defense from a long term perspective, and of course from the Indian perspective. If you talk about a decade of the plan, and combined with the Make in India initiative, how do you see your investment in India turning in a decade in terms of indigenization? And if you sum up in terms of the valuation investment from the Boeing, would you be able to give a perspective as far as some of the figure you'd like to quote, which will of course give us an understanding about the Boeing commitment to India for the decade to come in terms of long-term perspective and vision?
Yeah, so certainly the investment in India that we make, we have a lot of investments that we're already planning for. We have a $250 million campus that we're building down in Bangalore, which will be an investment that is spent over the next several years as that campus is built out. It'll take a few years for us to get there. Of course, with these COVID times, we have to get through that. But that's going to be a showcase project for us in India. And it's going to allow us to innovate, not just in India for India, but in India for the world. In terms of numbers, we don't have a target per se in terms of our annual sourcing. But I certainly believe that we can grow beyond the $1 billion US that we already do over the next 10 years because of the capability of Indian manufacturing, partnering with the US. There's a lot of people out there that believe that this is a zero-sum game, that if you manufacture in India, that can only be good for India. And that's absolutely not true. Because if you innovate in India, if you manufacture in India, and you're able to manufacture at a certain level of quality and cost, that improves the competitiveness of your products, that makes you competitive in the US, that makes you competitive around the world. It actually creates jobs in the US as well. So it is truly a win-win, and that's why we've been able to get so many people supportive of what we've been doing in India over the past decade and what we'll do in India over the next 10 years. I'll give a couple of examples. Certainly, there's the large Air Force fighter campaign that has a very important Make in India component to it. And we, to the extent that campaign moves forward with that Make in India component, that will of course be a significant investment for us that we are glad to make in India to support the Indian aerospace ecosystem. What I would say is there's two types of foreign companies that do business in India. There's companies that are here because they have to be here, because they want to sell products to India, or because they need to support some products, or because they have some offset commitments they need to discharge. And there's companies that are in India because they want to be in India, because they want to not only ensure that India gets the best products and support, like Boeing does, but they want to leverage the incredible talent that is available in India for its global capability. And that is true of Boeing. We are in India because we want to be in India, because it's a market unlike any other, and it's a capability unlike any other.
Of course, let's talk about the defense policies now. As you must have noticed, the new defense acquisition procedure 2020 has been rather enacted from 1st of October, and Boeing is one of the largest, leading aerospace company in the world, and your presence in India. What are some of the things you'd like to talk about at DAP 2020? How does it affect you as a leading OEM in India, especially from the point of view some of the reforms in terms of foreign direct investment has been increased from up to 74%. And need your inputs on that, basically overall defense acquisition policy, Salil.
Yeah, so I think there's some definite positives that we see in terms of opportunities in the Defense Acquisition Policy 2020, and we're very grateful for the government on working with industry, not just with Boeing, but global industry, Indian industry, to take inputs and suggestions on how to take the Indian aerospace ecosystem forward. At the end of the day, that's we all are aligned on that we want the Indian aerospace ecosystem to grow, and we want to be part of that. I think there's some interesting opportunities in there that include, first of all, the buy global manufacture in India. You mentioned the 74% FDI, which will be an important element of anything that is Make in India going forward. And that creates, I think, opportunities to increase our presence in India for Make in India. Also, another one that's very, very interesting is leasing. We all know during these COVID times, we will be very challenged, not just in India, but around the world in terms of budgets. And sometimes leasing is a helpful medium-term solution to those budget issues in terms of being able to get capability quickly into the services. And of course, as leasing goes in the aerospace sector, Boeing is the global leader. For over 35 years, we have been leasing commercial aircraft. We've been engaged in many defense deals as well around the world. And so Boeing brings a tremendous amount of expertise to various leasing structures. And I think I personally am actually from that field many, many years ago. So I believe that could provide some interesting opportunity as well. I think one of the questions that I get asked quite often on the DAP 2020 is on the industrial strategic partnerships or participation, colloquially known as offset by many people around the world. And they ask me, hey, what do you think about that? And my view is this. Offsets are an important part of India's overall development in the past, and they'll continue to be, right? We understand that. We understand why they exist. And as a foreign OEM doing business in India, you have to be ensured that you are well positioned to live up to your commitments with regards to those. And while I'm proud to say the Boeing company has to this point lived up to its existing offset commitments on a US dollar basis, and that will continue to do so. And that as we look through some of the concepts and procedures that are there for offset discharge, I think we will be able to partner with the Indian government and Indian industry to further develop the ecosystem using some of what's in there. I'll give you an example. Civil aviation and defense, there's an element of the offset policy where civil aviation is not included as a discharge avenue.
Yes.
But there are parts in there, there are exceptions in there where it is, like for example in sustainment. And the reason that's very important, and this is important, it's an important example of the key leaders in the Ministry of Defense taking into account some of the feedback they received. The reason that's so important is because in sustainment, in maintenance, there are scale efficiencies between defense and civil aviation. And those scale efficiencies lead to lower costs, not just for defense and lower the cost of maintaining the defense platforms, which saves the services money, but also benefits the civil aviation industry. And that is an important priority for the overall economic development of India. So having the awareness of taking advantage of those synergies is something I think we were glad to see during this whole process. And that's just one example of it.
Salil, very interestingly, of course, was coming towards the offset, which is a key element of defense acquisition procedure. And offset, obviously, were thought upon as a way forward for acquiring some of the key technology through OEMs when they invest in India, or through some of those acquisition would happen either from the government side or from the military side, which did not take place, largely, offset as a form of acquiring technology failed in India. So there has been a lot of ambiguity and also suggestion from various stakeholders, including the Boeing. Boeing also had a problem in the past for offset discharge. Some of the delays happened. It was reported that. Having said that, how do you see such ambiguity has been resolved with the new offset policies? Also, the offset banking has been taken off. How will it affect you as the OEMs? You have some of the past commitments to be followed up on. Could you throw light on such policy change, ambiguity, and if you have a suggestion to further improve on that?
Yeah, well, Manish, these discussions around offset, there's always some give and take, and of course, many of the OEMs and industry associations provided some feedback. Some of it was taken, some of it wasn't. We certainly believe that offset banking would have been helpful. That was an example in terms of building capability in India. There was a rationale for why they wanted to not include it in this variant of the DAP, which is fine. We understand that. There's other elements of feedback that were incorporated, and which we're of course very pleased with. One example that I would give around tech, one thing I'd say about technology transfer, right? You mentioned an example where there were, it hadn't happened in the past. I think there have been some reports recently around, some transfer of technology on engines and things like that. Not related to Boeing, but what I would say is this. I think technology transfer happens in many ways. And I think we tend to focus on some of those really big ticket items, like the one that was mentioned, that I just mentioned, that was mentioned in the press over the past couple of weeks. But keep in mind that when companies like Boeing invest in India, and I mentioned we have 3,500 people here today, okay? Those 3,500 people are engaged in frontline aeronautical engineering. They're developing systems, avionics, advanced coatings, advanced materials research. They're doing that in India, for India, and for the world. And they're not just doing that to keep it within Boeing. When those teams work with our broad supply chain, I mentioned $1 billion worth of sourcing that we do here in India. They're closely working with many of our large suppliers like Tata, like Dynamatics, and MSMEs also like Rocell, to develop new variants of our products and new technologies here in India. Every single time we do that, and it happens multiple times a day, there is technological capability and tech transfer that is occurring in India to the Indian aerospace community writ large. And those suppliers today are going to be the bedrock of the Indian aerospace ecosystem tomorrow. It's those companies that are going to be the large system suppliers, and eventually some may even become platform OEMs of tomorrow. And I think that gets lost in a lot of this discussion about, this project didn't result in this tech transfer.
Right.
Yeah, we understand that's happening, but let's not lose sight of the incredibly important tech transfer that is happening. And that can only happen when a company like Boeing makes the commitment to India and sets up in India and has teams in India that are doing innovation in India. To me, I think that is what I would call the grassroots tech transfer that is happening at the ground level to make India more. So, I'd appreciate if people focused on that as well.
Salil, very interestingly, we spoke last time in Paris Air Show. I think you gave up the word called aerospace cluster. We talk about in India, aerospace ecosystem, and you have been focusing on this for a long time. Offset, again, coming back to that, it is related to the offset banking. As you said, we talk about not only the tier one company like yours, but aerospace cluster ecosystem is all about various ancillary company coming together and building an ecosystem, various parts and subparts. Now, offset banking was such mechanism. I understand the offset banking clause has been taken off. Will this impact, say, sort of incentive for a smaller company, say tier 3 company, tier 2 company to come along, as they would have come easily under the offset banking order book guaranteed on that? What is the policy uptake as far as Boeing is concerned? Your analysis is concerned, Salil.
Yeah, I can't really speak for how it will affect other companies, right? What I can say is how Boeing approaches these small suppliers. Look, and I will tell you that, yes, so the offset banking clause has gone away, but really our engagement with some of the small suppliers you mentioned continues on today and will continue tomorrow. That $1 billion US in sourcing that I mentioned, there's about 220, 225 different suppliers that comprise that $1 billion US in sourcing every year. I would say that probably 24, 25 maybe of those suppliers today already are MSMEs. Now, this was one of the things that people were afraid of with offset banking, is that MSME sector would be hurt in terms of their development. And I can tell you from where I said that Boeing will continue its engagement with those MSMEs. We are doing so right now. I mentioned Rocell, which does a lot of work for Boeing on wire harnesses and bundles and some of the most critical elements of commercial and defense airplanes. Rocell, an MSME, has won Boeing Supplier of the Year. It's an award that we give in different categories every year. Rocell has won Boeing Supplier of the Year twice in the past 5 years. That's just an example of really the Boeing India team's commitment to working with these MSMEs and upskilling them and bringing them up the learning curve and production curve to be able to perform at high quality and, of course, best-in-class costs. And we're going to do that, even if offset banking isn't there. So that's our perspective at this point in terms of how we think about that and some of the risk that exists for some of these smaller suppliers. But again, that's Boeing speaking. I can't speak for my OEM peers.
Salil, of course, now we'll talk about some of the future acquisition. On 5th, I was part of the Air Force conference with media where Chief of Air Staff, Chief Air Marshal R.K.S. Bhaduria talked about 450 aircraft, fighter jets and helicopters, various platforms India would require, which would be one of the biggest order for any country in the world, and it is a great opportunity for company across the world, aerospace company, to take it seriously, come and set up with Indian public sector. Having said that, he also talked about 114 MMRC-2, which called Medium Multi-Role Combat Aircraft project, which is in the pipeline. Boeing has already offered a Super Hornet for the long time. What is the new in terms of the offering as far as 114 MMRC-2 is concerned? How do you differentiate your offering? How does it make it a big differentiator among all other competitors when it comes to the Rafale 4.5 generation, when it comes to the Gripen, and also Lockheed Martin F-21, which is again a new platform designed from India, making for India, what they propose. Could you talk about Boeing offering Super Hornet in India? How it would be the game changer?
Yeah, well, so of course, there's a couple of fighter campaigns that are ongoing. You mentioned the Air Force campaign for the 114 aircraft, which will have a Make in India component on it. That's all still being refined, and we look forward to learning more from the Air Force of what that's going to be. But we're committed to that, to that campaign. I'll just take a quick step back, whether we're talking about the Air Force or also the naval requirement as well for carrier-borne fighters. The A-18 is an extremely Super Hornet, Block 2 Super Hornet is an extremely versatile aircraft. It is the lowest cost aircraft in terms of an operating basis of any aircraft, in the U.S. fleet. So that's an important differentiator in terms of the go forward requirements for fighters, because there, as you mentioned, are huge numbers of requirements, and those are going to be pretty costly. And so making sure that you're getting the absolute best value, not just on the upfront platform, but then overall on the sustainment and operating cost, is going to be very, very important. So whether you're talking about for the Air Force or whether you're talking about for the Navy, the Super Hornet is able to differentiate itself on that front. The Super Hornet is also differentiated in terms of its connectivity to the rest of the platforms that India is taking on, whether it's the Boeing platforms or not. As you think about the future of aerial warfare, and these are engagements that, of course, we've had with the Air Force, and they've provided this feedback to all of the participants and the Navy as well. That requirement for connectivity in the future of aerial warfare is going to be very important, and that is an area where the F-18 Super Hornet Block 3 excels. I would also say that sustainment is 80% of the ongoing cost, and including some modifications, upgrades of any fighter. So while there's huge numbers involved in purchasing the fighter up front, that number is actually dwarfed by the operating and sustainment costs going out 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Right, and Boeing has an in India for India program. In India by India program, which is designed to maintain the aircraft in India using Indian resources in partnership with the Indian services. And I think the combination of those things, along with, of course, our public-private partnership that we proposed for the Make in India element, I think all come together to differentiate the Super Hornet that has been offered.
You're differentiating Super Hornet in terms of the cost and life cycle cost overall, and sustainability over the time, which will reduce cost for the Indian Air Force to operate. And second, but still it is a less 4.5 generation aircraft, right?
No, I mean, it meets all of the requirements of what the Air Force needs. And I would say its connectivity and what the requirements are going to be for the future of aircraft are best in class. The problem with those definitions, 4.0, 4th generation, 5th generation, those are fungible terms that are inconsistently applied, right? Somebody takes an F-16 and changes things that I can't really describe and calls it an F-21. What does that mean, right? Is it no longer an F-16? I don't know. And the same thing is applicable to 4.5. I mean, that's not even a term that actually exists for aircraft, right? So
it's easy to define, for the larger public who has for understanding the aerospace jargon. For example, F-35 you can easily define as a 5th generation from the F-16 for a
sure. But what is a 4.5? Everyone has a different definition for it, right? People have a definition for what 5th generation is. That's fine. But what qualifies as 4.5, I can't really say, right? So that's the issue. What I can say ultimately is, what is the definition that matters the most, Manish, is the Air Force's definition. And that's the definition that we're still awaiting. And once we get it, we'll be very confident that we'll be able to meet all the requirements, that they have, because again, we are always engaged in dialogue with them in terms of what their needs are.
At the same time, there is a lot of buzz from the Boeing about your new platform, which is rather a upgraded version of F-15EX, and which I understand is underway. Is applying license for India, a specific license, what you call it. How does it pan out? How do you fit these two offerings in MMR C2-114, and which would be the better one? Would you take away the Super Hornet and rather you put FEX if you get the license? I'm sure you'll get the license because it would be a next, again, generation version, much upgrade than F-15. Could you elaborate on such offering from Boeing, rather also the ambiguity at the moment?
Yeah. Well, so again, it'll depend on what the Air Force's requirements are. At the moment, what we have done is we've applied for that license so we can engage with the Air Force across the totality of their needs. Right now, in order for us to discuss certain things with the Air Force, we need that license so it can become part of the broader process. We want to make sure that the Air Force has access to the full range of solutions that Boeing offers, and the upgraded F-15 variant of the F-15, the F-15EX, as you mentioned, is one of those. As you're probably aware, and your readers are probably aware, the U.S. Air Force has recently been upgrading its needs and has orders in work for that aircraft as well. And we believe that is an incredible endorsement of that aircraft. And so we just want to make sure that we have our full suite of solutions available for discussions with the Indian Air Force.
So F-15EX would be for India would be very specific to India, as we say, in terms of India specific enhancement, some of the key technology, network warfare, the enhancement, those would be very specific to India. If you could highlight some of the future plan for F-15EX for India.
Yeah. So what I can say on that one is that's going to depend on what the requirements are of the Indian services, whether it's the Air Force or the Navy. Boeing is always working with the services on ensuring that we meet those requirements when they do come out. But can't really talk about those at the moment because they haven't exactly been released in terms of what the India specific requirements are.
Chief, I recently also heavily spoke about our Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft project, which is an indigenous initiative of Government of India by DRDO and ADA, along with Tejas Mark II. A lot of OEMs talk about giving a helping hand to such key projects of India, being, of course, leading aerospace a leader of the world. How do you see such commitment, and do you have something in terms of in offering to India, or is just in principle commitment, the part of your Make in India initiative? How do you look at such offering and collaboration as far as these indigenous projects are concerned?
Yeah, well, there's a few things there, Manish. I would say that first of all, our development of the Indian aviation ecosystem is a large part of what is going to be required to make those platforms in India, whether you're talking about LCA or whether you're talking about AMCA or any other platform. That's going to be an important part of it. And Boeing does more than any other foreign OEM in India on that front today already. I said, but beyond that, certainly we would be willing to engage with Indian industry and HAL, other Indian government and DPSUs on whatever their requirements are on technologies to develop those platforms. Just keeping in mind that type of technological cooperation is often subject to government approvals, right? So in the case of Boeing, the US government and the Indian government would engage with each other on exactly what that collaboration would be. But some examples, of course, include advanced manufacturing, include composites, include engines. There's a whole host of opportunities that we'd be very excited to partner on, subject to those government-to-government approvals. That will be an important part of it. I will point one differentiating factor, though, for Boeing, in addition to the fact that, again, we're already invested in it more than any other OEM, is our ability to move to scale. You're talking about some very large numbers that the Air Chief Marshal noted in his press conference. And manufacturing at high technology is important. Manufacturing high capability is important, but manufacturing at scale is also important when you're talking about numbers like those. And one of the things that Boeing brings as a commercial and defense OEM, sort of in a unique way, because there is no other OEM in the world that has that same scale of defense operations and commercial, is the ability to translate that advanced manufacturing from a low rate of production to a higher rate of production, and the capabilities and best practices that are required to be able to do that. That's going to be, I think, an important differentiator for us as we support Indian industry on these various programs that you noted.
Salil, we're going to talk about now finally about the Indian Navy, which is going to acquire and has already floated the RFI for one of the biggest ever acquisition for $8 billion, 57 multi-role carrier-borne fighter. And again, Boeing has offered its a key flagship F-18 Block 3 Super Hornet, which is also a front fighter jet of US Navy. Again, back to the same, how do you differentiate it with the competitor? Again, you have the Rafale C version and you have Gripen also. What makes you different, apart from it being also the frontliner of US Air Force? What specific enhancement and offering for India and to Indian Navy?
Yeah. So the specific, again, we can't talk about the specifics yet because we need the Navy's requirements to be able to
some
do
of
that,
the selling point at least you can talk about for the.
But as I mentioned, my previous point around operating economics that I mentioned around the Air Force absolutely applies to the Navy as well. The sustainment costs are a significant part of the overall operating economics of the airplane, and that is going to be a critical part of the operating economics for the Navy over the long term. But I want to talk about one additional element that's, I think, specific to the Navy as it relates to the carrier-borne fighter and the advantage that the F-18 Block 3 Super Hornet brings, and that is the opportunity to further an already blossoming U.S. Navy, Indian Navy partnership. So whether you're talking about the various military exercises that have already occurred over the last decade between the U.S. and India, whether you're talking about the naval cooperation that occurs from platforms like the P-8I and the U.S. Navy's P-8A Naval Maritime Patrol aircraft, whether you're talking about some of the communications agreements like and technological sharing agreements like COMCASA that have come into play over the past 10 years that allow for greater connectivity between Indian forces and U.S. forces, having the F-18 Block 3 Super Hornet as the Indian Navy's carrier-borne fighter is another opportunity to further that cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. And I think we all know that there have been some greater tensions in the region over the past year. And that cooperation, I think, in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years is going to be very, very important. And the choice of the Super Hornet for the carrier-borne fighter role is, I think, going to further that cooperation at a very critical time in India's history and at a very critical time in the history of the United States to further the partnership between both nations.
Salil, before I close,
just a quick time check. We're almost at the end of the hour.
Yeah, so this is the last question to Salil, of course. And on this specific aspect of, again, Navy offering, we have a lot of platforms, say Supersonic, BrahMos platform, which is the mix of Russian and Indian joint scientific collaboration. How will these platforms be integrated in your American platform, say in this case of your Navy offering? Some of the thoughts on this.
Yeah. So again, without having the exact requirements, we can't really say. What I would note is that Boeing has a pretty strong history of integrating, with the requirements of the Indian Defence Services. I believe that I'll give you an example, the Harpoon missile system, right, that Boeing delivered was developed and manufactured by Boeing. It was actually the first integrated weapon system on an Indian designed and built fighter, right? So Boeing has a history of working through those requirements, but at this point, and being able to integrate as required, but at this point, we don't know what those requirements are, so we can't say specifically how it'll work with these particular aircraft. But, we've been able to do it on that example.
Thank you, Salil Gupte, President Boeing. Thank you for talking with us, Business World. This is Manish Kumar Jha signing off, and thank you for talking on a broad range of subject. Thank you for the Boeing vision, and to the public, to the viewers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Manish. Thank you.